All right, so in this one, we're going to make our checkout process being a little bit more user-friendly. So just make it look a little bit nicer and do something kind of easy and quick so we can, actually start polishing the experience for this checkout. So current total, I want to actually move it over here and then have several steps for the shipping, billing, and then credit card, and then do complete payment type of thing. Which we'll do in just a moment. But for now, I'm just going to move this over here. And again, this is going to be a nice little short video to do so. To make that change, we want to go into our template for the actual checkout itself. So orders, checkout. And this is where we're going to be making our change. And we want to move it from our get total amount. We want to move it over to the side here. So to do that, I want to make sure that I have all of the different positions for this correct. And we've got our shipping address at being column small pull right. And then our other one is going to be column small 6 as well. So I want to actually, first off, I'm going to cut this one out, current total. And I'm going to put in div class equals column small and 3. And I'll pull right on this one. Refresh in here. So now if I add a new address, showing up there, which is good. All right, so now I have this actual thing being here on the side, and I can do all sorts of things with this as far as how it's going to look. The first thing I want to do is actually make sure that it sticks where it is, depending on how I'm looking at this. So if I scroll down, the current total will stay with me. So I'm going to do div class equals to total. And add a div there. And then in my CSS, so I'm going to scroll, and looks like I don't have any custom CSS in here. So if you forgot, you would go into base.html to see how we can do custom CSS. And if I look at my base.html, I see that there's this block styles tag here. So going back into checkout, underneath the JavaScript block, or the jQuery block that is, so block jQuery, I'm going to put block styles. And just put a style tag in here just so we have the auto completion stuff and syntax checking within Sublime Text. Otherwise, those style tags are not necessary because of how Django renders the context or the template itself by using this block. Okay, so now I'm going to do something for its media queries basically. So basically, when we have a certain size browser, I want to make this column total being fixed. So let's actually do it so you see what I mean. So at media, and I'll do minimum width being 1200 pixels, curly brackets, and then here dot total position is fixed. And I'll just space it out so it's a little bit easier for us to read. Okay, so semicolon at the end. And if I refresh in here, now I see current totals over there. And if I scroll down, that current total stays with us, which is cool. So that also means that we can put a button in here. So let's say a href. I'll just put an empty button for now. And I'll say finalize checkout or complete order or something like that. We'll worry about that later. But that will allow us, so if I'm scrolling down or do something, that will allow us to do that. So this also means that if I had multiple things that I wanted to put here, I could complete the checkout at any time as long as I'm on this page. And then adding a new address is not a big deal because it's coming above it, which is something we also might want to change. But for now, I'm just going to leave it as this. And then the last thing, I want to update the credit card info, at least how it looks, because I do not think it looks that great currently. So credit card info, let's scroll down to it. Billing address we'll leave as is. Credit card number. So input type, I'm going to add a class of form control. And that gives us a better looking form itself by adding in that class. So you can do this for each one. So if I add it in for CVC, it's not giant still, which is good. As it says size, the size is what makes that difference right there, is it allows it to be there. And then again, adding to these other ones. And we see that we have a little bit of a bigger one down here, which is causing a little bit of an issue for us. So what we'll do is do div class equals to row, and then close off the div. So I'm going to tab these in a little bit. Tab that in. All right, so now that it's in a row, I can make columns for it. So div class equals column extra small 2, and that's going to be the first part of it. And then div class column extra small 3, and that will be the next input. And we can put a placeholder. So placeholder equals to 2, and placeholder equals to 2017, something like that. Flip back to Chrome, do a refresh, and now we have this expiration and year and day. We could probably get rid of this slash now because it's not really necessary with the placeholders, but it does change the way that label works. So perhaps we want to take off the label itself and put it above the row. Just keep it into the form row. Do a little refresh, and there we go. All we would have to do here is now make this bold with a B instead of span, and there we go. So now we've got our month and year columns there. If you wanted to get rid of that spacing, if we go to inspect element, we'd look at the column spacing between each one. So the row and column 3 and 2 have the actual padding on the outside of it. So padding right and padding left, if we get rid of those, it would be touching or basically near each other. So to get rid of them, you would do style, say padding right being 0 pixels. Do a refresh in here, and then there. It makes it nice and closer to it. And now that we've gotten rid of that, we might want to make that column being a little bit smaller on both of those. And doing a little refresh, and there we go. So now it's kind of looking better as far as adding a credit card number. And of course, you could add the CVC up here and do the same thing that we did with the expiration. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to remove the CVC from being in that row and put it into the row above it, the form row above it. I'll do div class equals column extra small 4, and this is going to be for the card number. And I want to make a div class of a row. So div class equals to row, and close off the div here. That's for the row, of course. And then div class equals column extra small, let's say 1. Now that I have that, I can go ahead and cut this whole label out and paste it into this column small. Get rid of this other form row and come back in here and do a refresh. It's way over there. So let's take a look at as to why. If I inspect the element here, I see column small extra small 4 is actually going all the way across. So let's turn it back to being, let's make it 3. And that's still too big, so I'm going to bring it all the way down to 2. And there, now it's fitting in a little bit better, even though the credit card number itself is a little big, where the year itself is a little bit bigger than that. So this is going to be kind of, I'm going to leave it at 3, and then I'll do column small, or sorry, style, padding right being 0 pixels. Do a refresh. Still a little too small, so let's go back into Sublime Text, and the label is what we see is actually causing the issue. So if I cut this out, paste it in here, get rid of the label, change span to being B for bold, and I'm going to do the same thing with CVC. Cut this out, get rid of the label, change span to being bold, and you could do that for all. Now we have it on all of them are the same. So now the card number actually fills this up a little bit more, and expiration and the date look a little bit better as far as how that goes. So we can add in some breaks here to separate the lines a little bit. Maybe one break would do. So that's a line break. So we have our credit card. It's looking a little bit better. And then as far as the submit button, this one we'll want to put a couple breaks still. And we'll add a class here. So I'll do BTN and then BTN default for now. And BTN LG for large. Refresh. We now have our submit button, credit card, CVC, and all that. That's looking good. So for our credit card itself, we might want to bring it in a little bit more. So I'm going to have it at the column small 6. So inside of div class row, column small 6, and just add in another div tag before the form ends. This changes significantly on how our actual items are being rendered, and that's because of how extra small is working. So down here, these look okay, but CVC might and credit card number might be a little bit bigger. So what happened here was we changed it from being 12, from going across the entire row, to being 6 or 5, either one. So if I change it to that, it does significantly change how these card numbers are actually rendered. So the CVC, I'm going to change that to being 2. Extra small, I'll make it 6. And now that makes that credit card number a lot bigger. Scroll down here, I'm going to just move these up by 1 on each one. And there, that looks a lot nicer than what it just did. So this is something simple, but if we hit submit payment, we now see, hey, this card number looks invalid. Cool, that's a good start. We do want to actually add something. We probably want to have something with our payment errors. So let's go ahead and copy that and go into our script, or a style tag, that is. Outside of this media block, I'll do dot payment errors, and I'll do color red, and font size, let's say it's 22 pixels. I'll refresh. Now if I hit submit payment, we've got these errors coming up. Cool, so that's actually showing us errors in here, which is perfect. That's what we want to see. But maybe we don't want it to look like this. Maybe we want it to have the Bootstrap Alert field. So let's go and get bootstrap.com and use one of those alert fields instead. Go into components and then alerts. So one of these, this would probably look better than what it currently has. So this is what we're going to be going with. So I'm going to actually just go ahead and copy this and alert the whole thing there. And I'm going to get rid of this style. Scroll down to class of payment errors. And I'm going to add this div class alert there. So I'll add in payment errors to this class. And let's actually see the errors again. So I'm going to run it, hit submit payment, and the errors actually come in here. So let's go ahead and I'm going to leave it. There we go. So if I hit errors, it shows it. Now you can see actually where the column is too. So it's actually spanning all the way across. So it's actually filling up this column. Now if we wanted to make the credit card info a little bit bigger, let's say for instance, this is 6, so it's in this little container right here. This is halfway through. If we want it to be all the way across, like what we had it before we added that column, that's how it's going to look, right? But we want it to be in the middle, so it's going to be like this. And then when we actually change the size of the browser, so will the credit card information will also change. Okay, so now we've got this payment bar here. We want to do it a little bit more dynamic than what it currently is. So if we look down here, we see that this is how it's actually setting the text here. So what I'm going to do is actually scroll down, and I'm going to give this an ID of payment, or let's say just call it card error field, or card error, card underscore error errors div. How about that? That makes more sense. So card errors div. So now instead of form find, before that we'll also do card errors div remove class hidden. So that also means we need to add class hidden, and then we will do that in the else clause. So add class hidden. So if there's no errors, it's going to add the class hidden. And then we want to add the class from the get-go to being hidden. So I refresh, now it's gone. If I hit submit payment, that error comes up. Hit submit until I actually make it correct, it will not go away. And we could have it where we can disable this error, but I want to keep it. So if I do a refresh, hit submit payment, again, it pops up and it shows us the actual error, and it says what the error is on the inside, which is good. That's what we want to see. Now, of course, you can do this in other areas. Your alert payment or your payment errors does not have to be anywhere else, but to make it actually display, this is a simple way to do so, because the Stripe is doing a lot of the heavy lifting for us, and we just added a class to the errors, and then we remove that class of hidden if that error occurs, right? Otherwise, it will be hidden. Okay, so that's a little bit better of a shopping cart. If you have any questions on this, let me know. Definitely check the code and kind of play around with this on your own, because it is important to kind of see how this is working. In the next one, I know we keep moving these back and forth, but after using it a little bit and playing around, we're going to move that billing address down to the bottom unless we select some default addresses and stuff like that. But that's what we're going to be working towards, is just making this nice and clean and based off of other types of shopping carts that we've seen using otherwise. Okay, so we will see you in the next one.